Welcome, Mr. St. Omer. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start off asking about whether or not there's a current policy position from HERMAT looking at the workplace structure in Trinidad and Tobago at this point.
Well, Dike, I'll start off by saying no industrial sector has been unaffected by the outbreak of COVID-19. Many people have had to make significant changes in their lives, and that includes HERMAT in terms of how we advise, and our members, in terms of how we advise our respective organizations as it relates to addressing the COVID-19 issues. So naturally, given the short notice that we've all had to make the adjustments, which included adjusting working hours, location, or even how staff were able to do their jobs, HERMAT has taken the position that naturally we would want to see organizations embrace the new that is emerging from this pandemic. This fourth industrial revolution is ushering in a new way of work that I think most organizations should embrace, because we cannot at least want to return to work and expect things to flow in the same way when there has been a natural shift in our labor markets and in how we structure our workspaces in light of the pandemic.
Thank you so much for that. And I see that there have been other spaces where there has been a move to try to get people back to the office physically. And one of them that you actually cited with me was the Great Resignation in the United States of America. Do you see the potential for something like that happening here in Trinidad and Tobago? And what are the factors going into that?
Well, the Great Resignation, otherwise known as the Big Quit, occurred very early in 2021 when a number of employees across the U.S. particularly saw a number of companies, so employees leaving their respective organizations and opting to resign rather than to continue under the current way of work. Many of them cited issues around childcare solutions, not enough flexibility with respect to their organizations given the shift that has occurred, the benefits not being consistent with what they now have to do, and the risk associated with contracting COVID because it was still relatively unknown. Many cited pay being too low and not enough opportunities for advancement. And of course, many felt disrespected by their employers. And that was some of the reasons cited for employees just resigning. And we have to recognize, Dike, that in Trinidad and Tobago, our social structure is very different to the United States. So they would have had a system in place where there's a 2-year unemployment benefit, and they'd rather stay home and receive an unemployment benefit than put up with the new changes, or at least some employers who wanted to maintain the old while the new changes were occurring as well. So I think that phenomenon that occurred is very different to the Trinidad and Tobago experience, where we've had an increase in unemployment. Our numbers went up, but we do have people who want to work, are willing to work, and their circumstances are a little bit different because we do not have that social structure in place that would say to any one of us, we could stay home for 2 years and be paid while we wait for the market to settle, or we wait for employers to make up their mind in terms of how they're treating, or maybe even waiting for the pandemic to be over and done with. So as a consequence of that, what was experienced in the United States is very different to our experience in Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you for that, but I like the fact that you speak about one experience and two circumstance. So even though the structure is different, are you hearing some of those same things in terms of being able to look and see, this is what I have in store for my child, I'm able to take care of them properly, or I don't think the structures in place are adequate, looking at the fact that benefits versus job descriptions, which may have changed or most likely changed during the pandemic, are they edging out in terms of, do you see some of those factors here in Trinidad and Tobago, even though the structure mightn't be in place for a big quit or the big resignation?
Well, firstly, I will say that the pandemic has prompted most organizations to rethink how we work, especially private sector organizations. Companies have spent the last 2 years really looking closely at working models and also looking at their own organizational cultures and values. And we see that playing out in a number of privately owned and managed businesses. And as a consequence of that, the world of work has shifted. I know employers personally who have said to me, Cavelle, we have no intention of returning to the physical workspace. In fact, This is saving them a lot of money in terms of renting in Port of Spain, in terms of some of the benefits that are associated with the employees' contracts of employment as well. And certainly the risks, there's some risk that is transferred from the employer to the employee when it comes to working from home. Now, in terms of childcare solutions, we've always had an issue with that in Trinidad and Tobago, since we've never had a policy position on even providing childcare solutions in the workspace. Employers were never really incentivized for creating such. So employers still, especially now with a pandemic and not wanting to have that risk in the workspace at this point in time, they still don't have enough incentives in place for them to give up office space for proper childcare solutions in the workspace. And this has been an issue long before COVID, and it will continue even after COVID. As a consequence of that, we saw that COVID had a difference in terms of the impact of men versus women, recognizing that women have often carried the responsibility for childcare and elderly care. And as a consequence of that, even for those who wanted to return to work, the fact that daycares were closed, schools were closed, a lot of them now had to make serious sacrifices as it relates to their own careers, trying to negotiate with their employers, work from home, so that they could now properly supervise their kids and contribute to the family in terms of the economic status of the family by way of employment. And a lot struggle, especially for those whose jobs could not have been done remotely. There are some jobs that you cannot do from home. That's just the reality and the nature of the job. So we see that COVID had a difference in terms of an impact between the genders, and it kind of pushed women away, a little way back further as a consequence of it as well.
Thank you so much. And just before we take that break, we have about a minute and a little bit. You use the word private sector, saying, okay, well, the private sector said that remote is working, virtual is working. What about the public sector? What are you hearing from the public sector?
Well, I mean, initially, the state did take a position where public sector workers were working from home for some time, but naturally, a significant percentage of the public sector, the services cannot all be done remotely, and hence digitization and digitalization of our workspaces has become a little bit more critical. So we've seen a number of services being online now as a result of that, and the need to transition from working within state entities and ministries to working from home. So we saw a lot of state agencies embrace new ways of conducting and doing business. But now with the call to return to work, it is our hope, at least, that some of the services that transition to being online will continue because of the ease of doing business, the convenience to the public in terms of the customer service delivery, right? And certainly we can now look at new jobs as a consequence of that, new technology roles. We have to look at what COVID is showing us and the new skill sets that is now being demanded of all of us in terms of the new way and the new will of work. So it is my hope that the public sector will embrace this as well and put in the systems necessary to ensure that the checks and balances still remain, although people are working remotely. It is not a fate that, or it's not something that is not impossible. Let me put it that way. It's something that could happen. If private sector could do it, certainly the state can as well.
And you spoke about incentives and working models, and that is something that we want to discuss on the other side of the break when we return to this conversation with President of HERMAT, Cavelle, Joseph St. Omer. Stay with us. We return with more.
The best laptops and tablets are at thebesttoys.com. Get an Evo 11.6-inch ultra-thin notebook, a Gateway 11.6-inch FHD ultra-slim notebook, a Gateway 14.1-inch ultra-slim notebook, a Gateway 11.6-inch 2-in-1 convertible notebook, or an HP 14-inch laptop at the best prices in TNT. Get the Fi 7 tablet for $474. We also carry Fi HD 8 tablet, Fi HD 10 tablet, and the Amazon Kids Edition 7, 8, and 10-inch tabs. You can also shop the latest Amazon Fire Sticks. Call now at 32-DBEST to order, or visit us in-store at Forces Flagship Mathbean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Free delivery available throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Cash or links on delivery. The best deals on laptops and tablets are at thebesttoys.com.
them ask, wear your mask.
Enjoy Simply More with a Digicel Prime Bundle. More data to listen more with D-Music. Watch more with PlayGo. Cheer more with Sportsmax. Tune in more with Go Loud. Get 25 gigs plus dedicated LTE data for apps for 30 days for only $249. Dial *323# or visit the My Digicel app to buy. Digicel, better together.
You are dearer to me than all the stars. So many wish but never reach. 'Cause when I'm falling and all the world seems dark, you help me find my peace. Oh, shun mi ba fishani. Oh, shun mi ba.
TDT News, committed, accurate, relevant.
Welcome back. We are going in depth on work situations in Trinidad and Tobago. We're doing that with the new president of HERMAT, Cavelle Joseph St. Omer. Mrs. St. Omer, I didn't say congratulations on your ascension, so give me the opportunity. I'm taking the opportunity to do that now. But on the other side of the conversation, you mentioned the fact that employment levels had increased, even though there were people who want to work. What does that mean in terms of that potential for migration?
Well, the tricky part of it, Dike, at this point in time in our history, the world's history, is that the entire globe seemed to be in crisis in one way or the other. We're seeing wars, social unrest, and forced migration versus voluntary migration. Now, for those of us who've had, who function in hiring roles, who function in jobs where it's highly skilled and a degree is required for the role, etc., there's an option to migrate if things aren't working out in your domestic market or if the market has shrunk, because we know that new markets emerge as a consequence of COVID. We see that in terms of healthcare and the medical fraternity, there's a demand for services there. We see in the technology sector as well, there's an increase. And in an uncanny, strange kind of way, even for funeral services and all of that, things connected with funeral services. But in some jobs, however, we've seen a decline in demand, and especially in terms of our creatives and the creative sector, we see a number of our creatives now choosing to go abroad where the market is a lot larger and opportunities still exist because our sector was closed for so long as well too. So some sectors, employees are choosing to migrate and seek greener pastures. And in some sectors, the opportunities continue to expand. So the labor market has shifted in a real way. And COVID has shown us what is essential and what isn't at this point in time. So there's a high demand for medical services, for health and safety services as well. So for businesses in the sanitization and production of OSH gear, gloves, and masks, they saw an increase in the sanitizers. They saw an increase in business. And we saw in the services sector a decline because of all the restrictions around lockdown. Restaurants still have not even recovered fully a decay from the consequences of COVID and the lockdown measures. And then on top of that, the spending and purchasing power of our people has diminished during that time. And that is factored in with also the increase in prices in terms of goods and services as well. So it's a number of markets that are interconnected and interrelated at this point in time that is causing a serious shift in the labor market and the movement of people. So in some sectors, there is a concern for migration, And it's also for skilled workers. So we hear people going into Guyana, where the energy sector is booming there. We saw in the Middle East, the call for nurses and teachers who could teach English. So certain skills are in demand globally, and a number of countries are making it very easy for migration. Canada is also continuously making a call. So we run the risk of losing talent if we don't engage them and engage them where they feel that they're earning potential, they're being paid a fair, they're compensated fairly for their services and their skills. And that's a real challenge for us here in Trinidad and Tobago, and a risk that we have, because a number of people that I speak with are exploring options for migration. And I know at least 3 professionals who have already migrated to Canada.
And that makes me want to ask the question that you hinted at a little earlier in terms of what are some of those incentives? What are some of those working models that you think we should try to be leaning on a little more? Because normally when I hear about brain drain, I think of people who are basically at the start of their careers. Possibly you went to school and then there was an opportunity for you and you decided to stay there, versus the potential, the way you're outlining, if I get it correctly from you, for a real mass migration with people who have those skills that are in demand in other places, that are willing and able to give those incentives and have those models that are a lot more acceptable to the individuals who've worked to build their skill set and their capacities in these sorts of ways?
Well, certainly compensation is a factor. And in some parts of the world, the compensation is more for particular jobs. We've heard nurses complain within the COVID period that their contracts of employment remain undetermined. We've heard nurses being on month-to-month, so certainly that creates instability for them. And as a consequence, if they could get a fixed term or permanent arrangement in other parts of the world, they certainly will take up that opportunity. So compensation and the structure of the employment contract is a concern. And also no opportunities for advancement, especially where in some businesses, especially private sector businesses and family managed businesses, it is quite clear for some professionals that they will only reach this far in their organizations. But if they travel and go abroad, and we see especially in the Middle East, the opportunities are real for senior roles, and Trinidadians, or Trinbagonians, I should say, always do well abroad. You know, we deem to be quite talented. Our academic and education system is good and is respected globally. So it's a real concern. Then the issue of childcare solutions, that has long been an issue before COVID, where a number of companies don't provide any sort of benefit or accommodation to their employees who have children. And this placed a real pressure on employees during this last 2 years now, and now we've entered the 3rd year of COVID, right? A real pressure on employees with kids. And it never existed before, and far less now, where there was no choice by the employer during this time but to say you have to stay at home and you can't bring your children into the workspace. Now we see things opening back up, but then it's opening up at a time where there was serious damage already done, psychologically, emotionally. There was a lot of mental health issues during this time as well, and a number of companies did not expand their EAP services or led with compassion and care. And as a result of that, employees, I guess some of them, feel hurt by their respective organizations. So that is also an issue, a lingering issue to be addressed. And then the working hours, in as much as we know that, okay, there was flexibility in some instances and VPN access and digital signatures were introduced, there was the blurring of the lines between when work starts and when it ends, because it is felt that, okay, working from home, so I could call at any time to access information. It is expected that you're on. Basically, some employees felt that they were working for 18 plus hours, because after dealing with kids in the school, they now actually settle down to get some real work done. So it's all these little things that is driving the push. And then also some employers on the requirement for COVID-19 vaccine. We do have a significant percentage of our population still yet to be vaccinated. And it's a real issue now when a number of employers have changed their recruitment and selection policies to include the fact that new and prospective employees must be vaccinated, and a significant percentage of our population still not yet vaccinated. So these are all real concerns that are causing people to consider alternative. We see the rise of the gig economy as well. So as a result of COVID, a number of people, they utilize their skills. We saw a lot of online restaurants and stores. I mean, I was really amazed and impressed, to be honest, by some of the new business ideas that I saw. So the gig economy has also risen as a result of this. And that in itself has real consequences for our economy in terms of the seepage of taxation and all of that too. So, I mean, it's real concerns that we all have to address holistically, meaning the state, employers, and unions to come up with the right formula for the way forward.
And we want to thank you so much for laying these things on the table so we can look at them, having them articulated a little better. And we want to thank you very much, Cavelle Joseph St. Omer, President of the Human Resource Management Association of Trinidad and Tobago. And we want to thank you for tuning in on behalf of the entire TTT News team. This has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you for joining us.
The winning numbers in the National Lottery online draws for Monday, 14th March 2022 at 10:30 a.m. Play away the number 2 Old Lady, Mega Bonus Ball called. Pick 2, the numbers 26 and 12 in that order. Pick 4, the numbers 3, 7, 0 and 6 in that order. At 1 p.m., play away the number 15 Sick Woman, Mega Bonus